In the 90s, when we went through this severe drought, we regionally went on a push to make sure that something like that never happened again. So we've had this sort of, 30-year push towards making sure that this region was fortified with water.
You are listening to the Capital Craft Podcast, brought to you by the San Diego Brewers Guild. I am your host, Eric Fowler.
And I'm Jeff Fox of Beer Media Co.
And I'm Dan Denham, General Manager at the San Diego County Water Authority.
Awesome, Dan. We're really excited to sit down today. And, we're really excited on how proactive y'all have been in building a relationship with our industry and with the San Diego Brewers Guild. It's been noticeable from our end on how much outreach and information that you pass down and how much you really want to be at the forefront of communicating with craft breweries throughout the county.
Yeah, the value of water and the relationship, it's been invaluable, really, not only for the brewing community, but for all of San Diego, right? We live and die, like quite literally, by having or not having water, and important as it is to the craft brewing industry, we're there to be there and support you all.
Yeah, so maybe give us a little bit of, your personal history and role within the organization and, how the San Diego County Water Authority interacts with the county as a whole, right? I live out in East County and I've got Padre Dam municipality, and why does it say that on my bill and not San Diego Water Authority? Yeah,
well, I'm not too far from you. I'm a Helix Water customer, but we do have 22 member agencies in the region. A lot of those are irrigation districts or water districts. Some are municipalities, right? City of San Diego, City of Oceanside, for instance. But I think really where I would start with how things got to where they are, just from the governance structure side of things, is when we started, right? In the 40s, that was the last time that this region could rely on local water. So think about that for a minute. I mean, the population back then, it was exploding. It was largely due to World War II and expansion in that regard, and the Western Fleet here in San Diego. And we became almost overnight, quite literally, reliant upon importing water to our region. As we began importing water and the population grew, so did the little service districts that you kind of alluded to. We're much further along now in that regard, but water still very much is localized. As you said, your Padre Dam Water District has very different needs than the City of Oceanside. But what we do at the Water Authority is try to collectively bring all parties together to deliver water to the region.
It's interesting, like here in Vista, where we're actually recording this, our city, I think, is about 60 years old, but our Vista Irrigation District's about 100. It just had its 100th birthday recently. So a lot of times some of these districts outlive the cities that they're, outage the cities that they're part of.
Yeah,
they're serving.
The Vista Irrigation District is older than the San Diego County Water Authority. So yeah.
That's really interesting.
So like how does that relationship work? And then if I'm a brewery and a customer buying water, like what is my relationship with a water district or county authority? So the water, the Water Authority's job is to get water here, essentially, right? Like I alluded to, there's no imported source, or it's only an imported source of supply for the most part. That's changing. And so, think of the system that we have that runs from Riverside down to the U.S.-Mexico border. Some of those pipes are big enough to walk through. That's the main backbone infrastructure of this entire region. And then you have sort of the offshoots, right? The different irrigation districts and cities. Our job, like I said, is to get the water here. And then at the retail level, it's managed. They have that real touch point with the customer and some of the breweries. Yeah, maybe you can touch on like the effects of drought over the years. So like I remember as a kid, I would always look at the reservoir, San Vicente in particular, because you can see it from the 67, and you would see the levels, and it would be going up and down. Like how has that changed over the years, and what is the impact of like a commercial or a manufacturing business of those changes over the last couple decades?
Yeah. So, I mean, I grew up here in San Diego, in the South Bay. Like we said, I live now in East County, but I lived through some of those droughts. And, growing up, I remember one of them in particular, my dad saying, if it's yellow, keep it mellow, right? Don't flush the toilet, right? He also told us to go around and turn off the lights around the house, which I still do with my kids. But, some of that stuff is sort of ingrained into us, right? My kids are 13 and 15 now, and they haven't really been through a real drought. Others in Southern California have, but I think in our space we haven't. Folks that have moved here from out of town, whether or not they take the water supply for granted or not, it's there, and that's because in the 90s when we went through this severe drought, we regionally went on a push to make sure that something like that never happened again. So we've had this sort of 30-year push towards making sure that this region was fortified with water. Interesting example, 2 or so years ago, about 3 years ago actually, the last drought that we had in Southern California, parts of Los Angeles were on 1 day a week watering. Lots of headlines in the LA Times, got national recognition. They are experiencing today what we experienced 30 years ago. And so you never saw any of that in San Diego because of some of the investments that we made.
That's interesting. So it's not, I mean, obviously, snow melt and where we get our water from impacts the quantity of water we have available, but that's not strictly the only determining factor on rationing and...
Right. Our resource mix, our water resource mix has changed over time. We used to get this sort of 50-50 blend from Northern California and 50% from the Colorado River. Because the water from the north is a lot more variable, we've moved more towards Colorado River water, which, for your
when you say variable, what do you mean?
Well, as you mentioned, right, the runoff and the snowpack, you have severely wet years and severely dry years.
Okay. So the availability of it can change quite a bit.
And so how that makes its way down to the urban coast, you can't count on it all the time. And so we've switched to more Colorado River based supplies, and then of course we have our local Carlsbad desal plant, which is about 10% of our regional. But with all that, there's different mixes of water, high nutrients from Northern California, high salinity from the Colorado River, and then of course ultra pure water coming out of the desal plant. Mix that all together in a blend and put it in the pipe for the retail.
Yeah, interesting. I mean, I think that was something that, when I was listening to our irrigation district speak, that, they had, some local reservoirs they use, and then they have some that they purchase from the water authority. And I heard Colorado River and some of those kinds of places. What kind of infrastructure does it take to be able to pipe water from Northern California all the way down here to Southern California to our breweries?
Yeah, I think the best thing that the San Diego region has going for us is that we are a gravity fed system. So when water comes in from the north, and much of California is like that, I mean, for the most part, but it's not really energy intensive, but maintaining those pipes, kind of going back to where I started with us in the 40s and really building the infrastructure we have now, a lot of that pipe is getting really old. And so we've never been in a position where we've had to make choices over deferred maintenance. So making sure that regional backbone infrastructure is there is kind of, first and foremost, like one of our top priorities. In addition, of course, to having the supply, you got to have the pipes to deliver it. We have a pretty intense capital program, and that program's aimed at rehabbing pipe and kind of trying to do predictive and preventative maintenance so that it gets down to San Diego.
Yeah. Is there a name for that project? I see a lot of signs around.
We have a lot of different pipeline relining projects. We'll take pieces out of service and insert steel cans and mortar grout them back together, and we're kind of methodically going down our system. I think what's really fascinating about our pipes, if we don't maintain them, a lot of them run alongside of like the 15, for instance. If that pipe that was built in the 40s blows, it blows out the 15. right? And you have catastrophic failure, catastrophic damage.
Because there's so much pressure on it.
Yeah, you bring essentially life to a halt, right? And so maintaining that regional backbones, it's super important. The difference is more on the retail side is a pipe break can be isolated to a small neighborhood or a small community. You can shut it off, repair it, do a quick repair. Our repairs take a while, a couple weeks.
In our changing world, the San Diego community needs safe and reliable water supplies to thrive. That's why the San Diego County Water Authority and its member agencies have been working for more than 8 decades to make sure our region is ready for whatever tomorrow brings. Diversifying water supplies, increasing local water storage, enhancing emergency preparedness, and caring for our precious natural resources. The Water Authority is building a better water future for generations to come. Our water, here for life.
Now is a harder time than ever for breweries to navigate the rapidly changing market, but Beer Media Co. is here to help. As a proud partner of the San Diego Brewers Guild, we are a full-service digital marketing and content creation company that works with San Diego breweries to reach new customers and create amazing engagement for their websites and social media accounts. If you are a small brewery owner trying to figure out the whole social media thing, or a larger brewery looking to up their engagement, send us a message at info@beermedia.co because we know SD Beer.
And you were mentioning that you had your water mix of mixing desal, Northern California, Colorado River, and then I mentioned that our local water then mixes that with its different sources. How much does that fluctuate, and how much would that affect the final product for someone like in a brewery?
Yeah, so kind of getting back to where it comes from Northern California with lots of nutrients and then a high TDS or salt content on the river. The standard that we shoot for is pretty. It's about 500 TDS. So we look for a water
TDS, total dissolved solids.
Total dissolved solids. Thank you. Yeah. So we look for something along those lines. How that is. Blended at the retail level is pretty much the same, but I think that's kind of what you get here in San Diego. If you don't have a water softener in your house, I don't. You start to see buildup of minerals, and that's the direct result.
Yeah, my wife made me buy a filter for the shower head because of her hair. But you start getting it on the faucets and all that.
Yeah, so we don't have soft water. I go and I travel with the family and go to places that have soft water. I don't feel like I'm getting clean, right? So that's just being a San Diegan. That's kind of like what we've become used to, I think. Yeah.
So beer styles are heavily dependent on water chemistry, and having such hard water can be difficult to brew an array of styles. So what a lot of breweries do, which isn't probably the most eco-friendly, is they'll install an RO system and use reverse osmosis and then blend in some city water that is harder so they can kind of build up their mineral profile by back blending city water that they stripped the original stuff with. So
yeah, it's not too dissimilar from what we do with the Carlsbad water, right? I mean, we take that seawater, force it through membranes, it becomes ultra pure. We add minerals back in, and then in fact, as you're describing, we blend it in with this resource mix that we have from the north and from Colorado River.
Yeah, we had the episode back on lagering with Doug Hasker, and you were talking about specifically how they did that, and so that was actually a good episode to maybe go back and watch.
Wow, what a good! That was like episode 3.
That's why I'm a marketing.
I don't
guy.
know what episode we're on now, but that was a while ago now.
I had to look it up.
Yeah, and so it makes sense that the water travels really far, and during that time it's picking up a lot, as it goes through it. But like obviously our bodies need those minerals, and yeast when you're making beer needs them, and get some of it from malted barley for the most part, but there's a lot of trace minerals in water that are really important to ensure a good fermentation, but also affects just like the perception of things like hoppy bitterness, or even carbonation can change depending on water chemistry a little bit. So it is really important, but it's hard when there's a lot of variability. So if a brewer wanted to know what the like profile of their water is, would they be able to go to you or a local district and get that from them?
Yeah, they would get that from their local district, and all of the local districts, they have requirements to put out water profiles. You know, their water content has this mineral profile associated with it. I know I get one from my district each year, and I'm pretty sure that that's part of, you know, California law and regulations.
Are the most of the different districts in San Diego County, will they be similar, or are there noticeable differences from district to district?
Yeah, it's going to be different district to district. You know, some agencies do have the benefit of a local runoff and local water. Some are completely dependent on the water authority and just these imported source of supplies. So let's take our biggest customer and arguably the largest district in the region, the city of San Diego, right? So they have reservoirs throughout the county, and just think of, you know, the back hills of San Diego, and then even, you know, closer to the urban center, Miramar, for instance. Water's coming from a lot of different places, and they're treating it in different ways and introducing what will be new sources of supply into that water and blending it with ours. So they have the largest sort of resource mix, but others just rely mostly on what we provide and what they can get.
That actually might be an interesting thing to think about. Is like if you have a brewing location down in San Diego and you open one up in North County or something, you may have to look into your different water profile and see if that's affecting. So you could have the same beer that you brew in two locations that might end up tasting different. That might be an interesting thing to look into.
Yeah. You know, one thing that our industry talks a lot about is it takes a lot of water to make a pint of beer. And so, you know, whether it's, you know, recapturing CO2 or finding ways to reuse your water, and a lot of it's, you know, recapturing water in a storage vessel so that you can then, you know, add chemicals and use it, or, you know, use it to rinse chemicals when you're cleaning. But it is a big consideration in terms of impact, but also cost. So how does San Diego compare to other regions nationally in terms of like what should a brewery be forecasting for, preparing for over the next decade or two as they're trying to keep their business and grow their business? Are there considerations and issues that they should consider that are specific to San Diego County that you might not see somewhere else?
Yeah, well, you know, first and foremost, the water that we have is expensive. It's some of the most expensive probably in the region. And it's expensive, quite candidly, because we have it. You know, the situation that I described earlier about 1 day a week watering. Now water in parts of Los Angeles are not as expensive as what you have in San Diego. But the trade-off there is curtailment of water, or 1 day use of water, as I was saying, for businesses. So, you know, in terms of the future of water, what we're trying to do is rebalance this water resource mix that we have right now. We have an abundant amount of supply. I think that this region is safeguarded against drought. But I think what it speaks to is for those regions like in Los Angeles or like in Arizona, as a matter of fact, can we be better water managers and take some of this and transfer that, whether real transfers through pipes, which we're at the bottom of the pipe, so it's a little bit difficult, or do these virtual transfers of water. We're doing those kinds of things instead of new infrastructure to kind of write some of the water off the books, if you will, to bring the overall cost down. I think that something like that kind of construct is really, I think it's the future of water management here in Southern California. We've been on the cutting edge with it the past 2 years, and I think you're going to start to see more of it.
That's awesome. That's great to hear. What percentage of water, just roughly speaking, do you think goes to like businesses and ag compared to residential?
Most of the water is residential here in San Diego, and then you take that even a step further, and most of it is outdoor water use.
Really?
Yeah, and so, you know, you think about squeezing that last drop out of the sponge. I mean, I think that we've done a really good job with indoor water use. I mean, some of that stuff is just hardwired in us as San Diegans, right? And even legislation that allowed for low flow toilets, right, and waterless urinals. When you go up and down the state, you don't really see that per se, but that's kind of like a standard almost here in San Diego. So future water conservation on the indoor side, I think we've probably reached the max. On the outdoor, probably, right, there's still a little bit of room. I mean, making our environment look a little bit more Mediterranean than tropical is probably a good idea. But that's a slow growth, and I've seen changes, right, since I've been here my whole life. But yeah, the future of water conservation, we're still on it, as in terms of advocating for a water conservation ethic.
It's interesting because I remember I mean, I think it's as a marketer, it's always interesting to see that you guys actively spend money trying to get people not to use your product, right?
Oh, absolutely.
It's a really funny thing to think about.
So you know what, when someone described to me, like, so you're in the business of trying to put yourself out of business, right? And it's a really tough nut to crack in the water space. I think what you want to have a normal year, right? You don't want to have extreme droughts, and you don't want to have an abundance of water. And I completely understand. It's counterintuitive when it's raining, right? And folks are saying, why is my water bill going up? It's not an intuitive business that we're part of, but when we have these fixed costs, right, of bringing water into the region, we enter into these long-term contracts so that you have the water. If you don't buy the water, it's like your mortgage payment doesn't go away. And that's really kind of what we're talking about.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. How does the San Diego Water Authority interact and engage with like the state or government on the city level? What do those relationships look like, and how much do those relationships impact the direction or like policy?
Yeah, we have a lot of interaction at the state and federal level. Years ago when we were in the drought of, I believe it was 2017, we made all of these investments in water. People's water bills reflected those investments. The desal plant, a water transfer from the Imperial Valley. The rest of the state was in dire straits for water. And what came down from the governor was sort of this one size fits all. You have to reduce your water use. You have limits, right? And we fought that really hard. It doesn't make sense for someone to ask our region, our customers, our community members to invest in something that they can't use. So we fought that really hard, and we got an exemption here in San Diego.
That's great.
To where we didn't have to reduce our water use. On the Colorado River side of things, we've been very active with every administration over the past 20, 30 years. Red or blue, water, has no political color. And we've had a great relationship with the Bureau of Reclamation, and our water is tied to really high priority water rights in the Imperial Valley. And that's been a great partnership with our friends in the Valley. It's not very common, to be honest with you, to have an urban water agency in the Water Authority have a great partnership with the farming community. You don't really see that in many places, but we have that here in San Diego and Imperial Valley.
Interesting. If somebody wanted to learn more about the way we get our water and the way that it impacts their business, what are some resources they can look into to dive deeper?
Yeah, I think, of course, you can go to our website, but what I'd really give a plug for is our Citizens Water Academy. Our Citizens Water Academy, you can find out information about it online. We kind of give you like a Water 101 class, and it's interactive. It doesn't take too much of your time. You go out and view some facilities, and you kind of get a primer as to what this water space is like. And I think really what that does more than anything, you're not going to become a water expert, but you're going to help this region become an ambassador for water. Understand what we have, how to use it responsibly, and don't take it for granted.
Yeah, I mean, beer is 90%, give or take, water.
Yes.
Right. So we can say it's healthy, I guess.
Yeah, that's it. Cheers to that.
Yeah, I forget it. Maybe it was like 5 or 10 years ago. We had these little coasters made that said beer is crunchy without water. And so I think I have some of those in my house still.
Yeah.
That's so good. Well, thank you for listening to the Capital of Craft podcast. If you'd like to hear more, make sure you subscribe, and you can check us out on Instagram at SD Brewers, and we'll love to see you next time. Cheers.
Cheers.
Cheers.